Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this ECB focus session. My name is Aylin, and I'm here with a fantastic team of colleagues. We'll help you guide you through today's event. The topic of the focus session today is non-time critical payments and tips. So this will be an interesting session to dive into more on these non-time critical payments. What experience has shown us for these focus sessions is that there's a lot of interest. You guys are interested in these. And for this reason, we are live streaming the event. So we would like to invite many of you to move into the live stream if you're not there. The easiest way to do that is really just to grab your smartphone and then scan the QR code on the screen now, or you can, of course, also click on the link if you have that one available. Of course, you can't click because it's not clickable, but you can rewrite and go to YouTube and then find us there under the ECB channel. But scan the QR code. That's probably the easiest to have that as a backup in case anything happens for you during the event. You can always move to the live stream and watch everything there. That's just as a backup for all of you to know, and also just for everyone to be aware that, of course, as always, we will be recording and we will be publishing all the slides that we use today in today's event. So you will be able to rewatch or just go deep dive into the slides afterwards. So those two options are available. So rest assured that even if you miss a few minutes, the material is there for you afterwards. So some practical information for all of you. You will not be able to speak even if you're in the webinar. We do this because we have such a high number of participants joining always. So we keep everyone muted to keep the quality up high. But you can ask questions. Again, the way to do that is no matter where you are connected, pick up your smartphone and then scan that QR code on the screen now. This is the way to ask questions. You will be open into a browser where there will be a forms that you can put any questions that you have for today's session there. And we will try to pick up as many of those questions as possible, but it always is challenging, so bear with us. There's also another way to do that. You can also send us an email at the email address shown on the screen now, which is mip.events@europa ecb.europa.eu. So that is a tongue breaker, but again, photo that, take a photo of this slide, and then you have that for later in case you want to send us an email. So that's the form to do it. And we encourage all of you, of course, to raise questions. We try to make these as interactive as we can. So that's the purpose of the events. All right. So what else do we have in mind, you guys? It is a heavy program. So as you can see, within the next hour and a half, we will be deep diving into a lot of different sides of non-time critical payments. So, just buckle up there in the back seat and, we'll be taking you through all these topics in the next hour and a half. But before we do that, I just want to flag one thing for all of you, because what we did notice when the people signing up, we saw that a number of you, and we're delighted to see this, you found out about this event by the newsletter. So there's a lot of you out there that are signed up to our newsletter, and we're delighted with this. Again, QR code. We're loving QR codes here, but that's the easiest way to speak to you on screen. You can just scan the QR code if you want to sign up for the newsletter, or you can also just take a photo of this slide so you have it for later. So the newsletter is a great tool to stay informed about what we do. It's anything that happens at the ECB Eurosystem on payments and market infrastructure topics. We will be sharing that in newsletter. There's also other ways to stay informed about what we do. And I would encourage you to join the LinkedIn group, Market Infrastructure and Payments. It's We actually try to publish here before we send out the newsletter. So it's just a little heads up. If you really want to be first on the news, this is the place to go. So sign up for the LinkedIn group. It's a great way just to get quick news about what goes on. And of course, we also publish anything related to the events we do in the group. And of course, we're also on X, so you can follow us there by at target_ECB. So these are the options. Maybe take a photo of that so you have it for later. And that's it from my side. We have a lot of things we want to go through today. So we just want to dive straight into it. And I'm really delighted to have our first speaker on with me here today. It is Dimitri Patang, Deputy Director General at the ECB. And Dimitri, I want to bring you on and welcome to today's session.
Yes, good morning and welcome. Do you hear me well, Eline?
I hear you perfectly,
okay.
perfectly.
Good. So good morning and welcome. In our last focus session about 2 weeks ago, we covered a wide range of topics related to the development of the target services. Today, we want to be more specific and we want to discuss with you the case of the non-time critical payments, or NTC. Non-time critical payments are those payments for which speed matters without strictly requiring that the settlement is immediate. And those payments can be processed with a less stringent time frame than the one that is applicable for instant payments. And today we will, of course, deliver a number of concrete use cases to you. We believe, by the way, that using the rails for instant payment to accelerate the execution of these payments is useful. There is a high interest, Eline hinted to that, there is a high interest for this event. I was told by the backstage team that there is more than 400 people registered to the event. There is more via the live stream. We have more than 250 institutions around and representing 34, if I took well note, 34 different countries. And we have a tradition of being very active in those focus sessions. And we hope it will be the same today. We like when you ask questions and we always have the people on board to try to answer most of those questions. And Eline just explained to you how you can raise those questions. Now, before entering into the substance, I would like to share with you a bit of background. TIPS, as a platform for instant payments, was launched in 2018. It is now settling between 7 and 8 million transactions per day. Obviously, not all in euro. TIPS supports multiple currencies by design. We are now settling 3 different currencies, obviously the euro, but also the Swedish krona, and since Easter this year, the Danish krona as well. We are obviously very happy to see that happening, and other currencies have already announced their intention or confirmed their intention to also join TIPS. Beyond the multi-currency capability of TIPS, we are also developing cross-currency service in TIPS for the currencies that are present on TIPS. And we are also investigating the potential interlinking with other fast payment systems. I will not develop this today because we already, well, first, it's not the purpose, but we already had a focus session in December last year to explain the roadmap for cross-currency capability in TIPS and the cross-platform interlinking. As you know, there will be very soon the instant payment regulation. It's coming very quickly. It will introduce several changes to enhance the efficiency, the accessibility, but also the competition within the instant payment ecosystem. Concretely, the IPR will introduce items such as the verification of payee. The purpose is here to reduce the risk of fraud. It will introduce equal pricing between SCT and SCT Inst. That is aimed at fostering the adoption of instant payments. And it will also include non-bank PSPs and from October onwards, non-bank PSPs will be allowed to become participant in TIPS, and this should in principle increase competition. And this, what I just explained as a background, highlights that instant payments are growing in maturity and has more chances than ever to become the new norm. But now that these rails for instant payments are well established, we believe that it's useful to expand that to other use cases. And today we will cover the case, as I said at the beginning, the case of, we call them near instant payments or non-time critical payments. And the benefits of those non-time critical payments are multiple. One, you have the optimization of liquidity management. You have also an enhanced cost efficiency, and NTCs also support business-specific needs where transactions benefit from optimized processing without necessarily requiring immediate execution. This is, for instance, the case for bulk payments. NTCs also bring their own challenges because these new instruments using the instant rails must be implemented without slowing down the regular instant payments. And I'm sure the colleagues will explain that in great detail during the session today. Let me spend maybe a few words now on the casting for the session today. Today we'll start with Fabrizio Dinacci. Fabrizio is the team lead for TIPS in our team at the ECB, and he will present some use cases that make NTCs on instant payment rails relevant. Then we will have, and this is a bit unusual, we will have a panel session. We will learn from practitioners more about the benefits of NTCs and what those non-time critical payments can deliver to PSPs, and especially on the combination of the availability of SET Inst and the certainty that SET is offering. So the panel will be moderated by Karen Birkel. Karen is head of division at the ECB, amongst others in charge of the development of TIPS. And in the panel, we will have Martijn de Ruiter. Martijn is head of SEPA products and payments fraud prevention at Rabobank. We have Michael Knetsch, who is acting as a tribe lead for instant payments at Deutsche Bank. And we will have Carl Bengtsson, sorry for the pronunciation, who is acting as a business developer at SEB Treasury. And finally, we will hear from Andrea Di Martina. Andrea works at the Banca Italia, and he is actually the mastermind for TIPS in terms of design. And he will share with us some insights on the technical implementation for non-time critical. And with this, I close my opening remarks. I will come back at the end of the session for some closing words. Now, I wish you a fruitful and interactive session. And again, do not hesitate to raise questions. We are there for that. That's really the value from our perspective. And now back to you, Ellen, for a fruitful session.
Thank you, Dimitri. Very delighted to have you on again today, and I'm pleased that you'll be staying with us. So as always, you can always post your questions into the chat. You can start already now with the tools we gave you at the beginning. So without much later, I want to bring on our second speaker, Fabrizio, if you're here, and then we will also be sharing some slides in a minute. So Fabrizio, we can just have a little chat here before the slide come on. I'm really glad that you're here with me. Yeah, there we go.
I'm Fabrizio. Delighted. And thank you for the invite. Let me start maybe with something that I owe to someone, that is the colleague Bernard. He should have been here presenting, and also the slides were prepared by him. Unfortunately, last minute he couldn't not make it, but a hi to Bernard and the thank for the work done. Let's start getting into the matter. But before getting a little bit into the matter, let's start with a situation from real life. Elin, imagine that I owe you 1,000 euros and you come to me and say, but Fabrizio, I expected you to give me 1,000 euros. This didn't really happen. And I have to explain to you, I'm sorry, Lynn, I really did with my bank, but you know, banks are slow. Sometimes maybe you have to wait until after the weekend. I mean, wouldn't the world be better if this could never happen and we could have a very efficient way to talk about and to transfer money? Let's talk about non-time critical payments today. And that is the reason why we are here. And it's a wonderful day to be part of the TIPS community today, more than ever. Dimitri was already recalling some figures. For the first time in the weekend, we settled something like 26 million something payments. 26 million times someone in Europe trusted their money with their banks, and their banks trusted TIPS for the final settlement. That's amazing. That's really something beautiful and growing really month by month. And for this, we are really grateful for the whole market. But as TIPS wants to keep providing the highest return on investment, not only for participating into TIPS, but also for the future that TIPS will do, let's talk about the non-time critical payments. So what are these non-time critical payments? As already Dimitri was explaining very well, we are not going to slow down instant payment. This is not about slowing down instant payment. It's rather the opposite. It's like putting the customers of banks admiring their banks because their banks are ready to settle pretty much immediately things that would not need to be settled necessarily in an immediate way. But still, the banks can show to their customer, we are so efficient that we are providing a service of this additional level, another level, a further level, not just the old thing that Elin might have to wait until after the weekend. So the non-time critical are payments that by nature are extending the life cycle of the transaction. So we know that there are very stringent timeouts for instant payments, and that is something that will become even more stringent after the next version of the rulebook in October. And that is extending the life cycle for transactions that do not require an immediate settlement of the payment. So this, in a way, is where flexibility meets efficiency. But it's not the first place TIPS actually that is proposing this, because there are other situations where this has already happened. And so we see already now in the bottom part of the slide that already in the Netherlands and in Australia, this is already used as a functionality, although with some differences here and there. We will elaborate a little bit on this. And this functionality will also be supported by Nexus. So you see that even for a global hub that is supposed to cover the needs more or less of all the advanced economies, and even the not advanced ones, as long as they have some good market infrastructure that can connect to, they are going to provide the possibility to settle with this functionality. So let's go to the next slide. And in the next slide, we see what happens, for example, in the Netherlands. So we have, again, that there is IP processing. That is the secret. IP processing means that there is the same processing as for an instant payment. Andrea will elaborate much more and much better than me, but with a longer timeout. Of course, this mixes up the availability that has to be 24/7 as well as for the SCT Inst, but also with the reliability of the old credit transfer scheme. So this putting together in a way is done by some special code that is used to differentiate the non-time critical from the normal, let's say, regular old, so from the regular instant payments and from the old credit transfers. In Australia, things are a little bit different. So there is, in a way, a decision, a conscious decision of a payer that sets a priority, and the priority can be attended or unattended. This is a way to classify in Australia. I would say that it's not necessarily the only way to do, but I think it's also a very smart way to do in Australia. There is, of course, the real-time confirmation for attended payments. If I am at the taxi and I am going to pay for my taxi, I want to have a real-time confirmation. I don't want to give any extended time to my bank or the bank of the beneficiary. Of course, the payer PSP is in control of the flow rate of the unattended payments, and that is where the flexibility plays a really big role, because here the control is in a way given not only to the payer PSP, but the payer PSP is in control also of the management of the peaks. In a way, it is the whole architecture, if you like, that is going to be used in a way more efficient way. And of course, every payer PSP will always prioritize the attended ones, because those are the ones that cannot be slowed down. Dimitri said it so very well. We cannot afford to introduce this functionality slowing down the instant payment. We are not going to slow down instant payment. We are going to greatly accelerate what today is the old and traditional credit transfer. Of course, the functionality is offered in the NPP, so what is called the new payments platform. And then we go to Nexus. As we said, Nexus will be supporting both time critical and non-time critical. Here it is done in a different way. So differently from Australia, in the Nexus world, we are not going to have necessarily that a payment needs to be attended or unattended to be classified as time critical or non-time critical. The urgency, in a way, is set as a priority level in the PAX 008. So where the priority urgency is set as high, it will be, of course, time critical. And if we consider norm, it will be non-time critical. Sounds easy, isn't it? And still it's not. And of course, again, I would invite all of you not only to watch the panel where all the insights are shared, but also the technical presentation of Andrea Di Martina that will explain how all of this can be achieved without slowing down the instant payments. Now, if we go to the next slide, we have some examples of business case for the non-time critical. Of course, we have the non-batch and non-bulk payments, but we have also the batch and bulk payments. And so on the one hand, we have that we can use non-time critical in addition to the SCT Inst, because of course SCT Inst can always be used. The decision ultimately, thanks to the IPR, is in the hands of the customer, but it's important that also maybe the customer is informed by the bank of this additional possibility that can be really equally good. Let's remember, in the Netherlands, more than 99% of the non-time critical are actually time critically settled. And that is really where the settlement efficiency kicks in. So for the non-batch and non-bulk payments, you can have clearly use cases like standing orders or scheduled payments, also tax payments. Whereas for the batch, well, you know why you can use the batch. So of course, for salaries, pension and social benefits. But here, I think that what is important is that the batch, some banks in a way have the fear that if a batch is sent on the rails of the instant payments, there is the risk that especially small banks might be overwhelmed by the flow of the messages that are arriving. And you don't want to be the bank that is in the situation that has to reject payments just because too much is coming your way and you do not have the capability to to sustain a higher TPS, or the number of transactions per second. So if NTC becomes more spread and more used across all the board of the TIPS customers, this will help the banks to protect their reputation, to make sure that the payments that are for their customers are not rejected just because of some technicalities that they could not figure out how to solve, or maybe for objective difficulty in solving. The advantage here is that we have an alternative to the old SCT and to the new SCT Instant. And from the point of view of the user, this is a positive customer experience, because if I go to Eline and I have sent the €1,000, more than 99% of the times Eline will see that after a few seconds anyway, in a matter of 3-4 seconds. So I guess that I, as a customer, would be happier with my bank. Eline certainly will be much, much happier with her bank, seeing that she has already received the money. From the point of view of the PSP, we have to differentiate between the sending side and the receiving side. As I said, on the receiving side, it's about protecting your reputation. You don't want to be the one that is slowing down or even rejecting payments. And so ultimately, you have an operational stability that is kicking in. On the sending side, of course, you can optimize the processing, and you have also a way, thanks to the solution that we have in Tips, or not having any interference with other instruments. So the rails are different than the rails for SCT Inst or SCT. And this is quite striking, because the rails are different, but the system is one. We are not going to ask any participant to pay another account maintenance for this. There will be the same participation, but with much more functionality that is provided. Now, if we go to the next slide, we see that, as we said, the non-time critical processing helps to optimize the infrastructure. But here, infrastructure means not only TIPS or CSM, but at all levels. Of course, also the infrastructure of banks. It helps reducing the peak loads. It also ensures the efficiency, but at the same time maintaining practically all the benefits that are coming already with the instant payments. And again, there are some elements here that more or less we already elaborated. Here, one point I would like to make sure, again, we are TIPS. So TIPS means that we take care of the whole ecosystem. We don't take care of TIPS only. That means that the new functionality will be available to all the DCA, but also to all the ASTA, so the so-called ancillary system technical account, or in other words, the accounts that the ACH have on the TIPS platform. We are not going to prevent anybody from using this. And of course, that will become all together with the implementation. If we go to the next slide, that is also the last slide, and it's about a recap on the benefit. Again, we have a processing that is very close to an instant payment, but provides a level of flexibility that is way higher, and still without losing the efficiency of settling, as I said, more than 99% of the times within a few seconds. NTC will also help managing the peaks, as we said. But, you know, there was an important element that was presented in a webinar a few weeks ago, and some ACH, a very big one, an important one, was saying that to go to one leg out, OCT Inst, will require an investment of 5 to 20% on top of what is for the SCT Inst, what was already done. So you can imagine it's not that much. Well, of course, for NTC, this is much lower, because it is much simpler as a system, as a functionality is simpler. And on top of that, it will replicate the processing of SCT Inst already. So don't be afraid, I would say, to all banks that are thinking that maybe, oh, the level of complexity might create problems. No, it will not. It is just a matter of making the right decision at the right point in time. And the more you use, the more you will realize that it will provide profit to you. It will provide customers satisfaction to your customers. I would not bother anybody by reading all of this. I think that my time has still maybe a couple of minutes. I don't know if there is any question that could be replied here.
Hi, Fabrizio, I'm back. Thank you so much. Thanks for speeding us through the NTC payments. And you know what? I like these non-time critical payments, because they just made me another €2,000. So I'm happy to see this come in. So thanks for that. There are a few questions coming. I think we've answered a lot of them, but we will probably go through them in the panel. So you guys are, ahead of us. But here is just a reminder, this is where you can scan and shoot questions into us. And I'll just let Fabrizio quickly go through here as well, and then spend 30 seconds with all of you on where do you find all this stuff on our web pages? Because what we have noticed today is that we have actually a lot of new commerce with us today, that people that have not joined our sessions before. So I just want to let you all know where you can find stuff on the website, because it can be a bit of a jungle. So once you're at the ECB website, you want to go to payments and financial stability, top level of the band there. And here you click, and then you can come into the target services as you see on the screen now, and then you can move over to tips. Once you get there, there is a section of professional use documents. And here you can find anything that's related to tips. So anything we would do, we will post here. So if you are already a participant or planning to join tips, this is the place to find information about tips. There's another place we just want to briefly highlight for all of you, which is on the next slide here. Again, same place, payments, financial stability, the most important place of the ECB website. There's a section called payments, news, and events. And that's the place we have highlighted in yellow where you go and find, for instance, this focus session, where you can see the live stream, where you will see new events. And the same place is also where you find anything related to news. So that was just, a little heads up to everyone who isn't familiar with our sessions today. And then I have let Fabrizio take a 30-second breather.
I tried to scan. It's amazing, but of course we cannot reply to all of them. But there is an interesting question. Well, many are interesting, to be honest.
Yeah.
But so there is someone asking that do we consider tips as a backup solution of regular SCT? This is something different from SCT. If regular SCT works, why to change? Eileen, would you like to change that when money comes to you, you don't have to wait for a weekend, but you have to wait 3 seconds?
Yeah.
Multiply this by more than 300 million inhabitants in Europe, and you will see why banks should come to this. If banks don't care for all the elites of Europe, okay, you can remain in the old world. But if you want to provide a service that makes your customer proud of you, that is the way you have to do it. That will also create the possibility for banks to charge on different services. So in the end, once again, tips will remain a great occasion for getting more profit and for having a higher return on investment at every level. I think, Eileen, that my time is already gone, so I will stop also because the panel is so interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. Thank you, Fabrizio. So keep shooting your questions in there. And although Fabrizio and I can speak fast, we will now hand over to the panel because they have lots of interesting topics to go through. So I'm really happy to welcome Karen Birkel, Head of Division at the ECB, and the panelists. So the floor is yours, Karen.
Right, thank you very much, Eileen. And yes, please join us this morning at our fireside chat about non-time critical payments. Take your hot chocolate or any comfort drink that you like and hear the crackling noises of our fire and visualize the warm colors of our virtual fireplace. So today we're going to be diving into an interesting conversation with our very knowledgeable panel members that I'm going to be introducing you a little bit more. Dimitri already introduced them earlier on. But first of all, why are we here today with our panelists? We're going to discuss the benefits that non-time critical payments offer to PSPs. We have 24/7 availability with SCT Inst features in tips. So why should banks support non-time critical payments in tips? And which business cases? Now, Fabrizio mentioned a few business cases already, but we're going to be hearing from the panelists who are out there as PSPs in the business cases that are interesting for them for non-time critical payments. I'd like to introduce to you Carl Bengston, who works at the SAP Treasury on development projects, both internally and externally. He covers the cash part of all the product areas globally for the SEB, and he has been in the banking industry for more than 20 years. Martijn de Ruyter, the head of SEPA payments and payments transaction fraud at Rabobank. So you're responsible, Martijn, for product management and delivery related to SEPA products, including, of course, instant payments and a number of other related applications. You're also responsible or accountable as a risk and model owner regarding the external fraud and coordination of relevant policies and awareness. Now, last but not least, I'd like to also bring in Michael Knetsch this morning, Tribe Head of Instant Payments across the globe for the Deutsche Bank, ensures that the product stays on par with client expectations and driving the commercialization of the product. Before you joined Deutsche Bank, Michael, in 2019, you've been within the payments area also more than 20 years through, for example, the Royal Bank of Scotland, C2P Consulting, Logica Consulting, ABN AMRO, different roles in consulting, market management, product technology, and also in leading roles in strategy and innovation. So I'd like to welcome indeed my very knowledgeable panel today, and I have a few questions for each of you. And then we're going to take a look at the questions that are coming in from our viewers. Martijn, if that's fine, I'm going to start with you.
Of course.
In your market, Rabobank offers non-time critical payments. So given your experience, how does the flexibility offered by non-time critical payments contribute to making instant payments the true new normal in the market?
Well, thank you for your question, Karen. Good morning, everyone. Martijn de Ruiter, as mentioned before, and happy to be here. So to try to answer the question, the short answer would, well, it was actually already covered by Fabrizio. So it's best of both worlds, which allows for the introduction as a new normal. So non-time critical from our perspective allows us to enjoy the benefits both of the instant payment scheme, so the speed and availability, while also granting the certainty of the standard or old SEPA credit transfer scheme in terms of the payment not being rejected for not meeting a specific timeline. To start with a slightly longer answer, the Dutch community, as also mentioned, right at the start of the SEPA instant credit transfer implementation in 2019, decided to try and cater for the broadest implementation that we could, and this led to the viewpoint that some transactions are not as time critical as others, and that we could benefit both from the PSP perspective and the PSU or the payment service user perspective. So in other words, you could say that the flexibility of the non-time critical processing is by definition the key to its successful use. To highlight how this works, the way we implemented it at our institution is that we do not offer our users a choice between non-time critical or time critical. We just implemented the non-time critical perspective. We take it all the way. So it's important to realize, again, also mentioned by Fabrizio, this does not mean that we delay the transaction processing up to the point where we want to process. We try to process instantly in all cases, and we are able to do so in close to 100% of transactions. So in this way, again, the benefits are enjoyed in virtually all cases, unless there's a need to trigger the non-time critical element. So to zoom in on those elements quickly, Fabrizio mentioned some of the situations. So timeouts or technical issues could trigger a slight delay, and we felt that rejecting the payment is likely not to be in the best interest of the payment user or the payment service provider, as we might be able to process the payment after all in a matter of seconds or maybe minutes. Sometimes, unfortunately, it takes a little bit longer, but there's many cases it's just a very small delay. And having the non-time critical processing removes the obligation for a payment service user to reinitiate the payment, which is obviously a key concern to remove. This advantage applies in general, but it is most visible, again, in the cases also presented by Fabrizio, such as future dated payments or recurring payments. And going forward with the instant payment regulation, we would also see that for batch processing, a similar use case would apply. So long story short, again, summarizing, we've intended to use non-time critical processing as a measure to allow for the broadest implementation as we could. For us, it means we didn't have to educate our users. It works. We have had zero, or at least close to zero, complaints on the matter. So users do not seem to notice or care whether we process non-time critical or time critical, while both us as a payment service provider and the payment service user are enjoying the benefits that we mentioned before.
Thank you very much, Martijn. Very good knowledge, really very good answer there. Everyone has some insights to think about. Now, Michael, in several fora, you raised the point about the need for market infrastructures to handle payments with a different speed. And you've used an analogy that we need Ferraris, but also trucks to be on the road. Now, could you explain this to everyone? What do you mean by that analogy? And how does it relate to the concept of non-time critical payments addressing a challenge?
Yes, no. Thanks for having me here. I'm happy to explain a bit. As you know, I've been a long time an advocate of, I call it the perfect storm that we're heading into. So given the instant payment regulation, given the fact that we have the European payment instrument, to driving, they all want to rely on the instant payment rails. Maybe go to the analogy, of rails, not Formula One tracks, but if all need to ride on that same train rail, can we facilitate, If you look at trains or cars, you have different trains as well. We have intercities, you have high-speed trains, so you want to make a differentiation on that. And in that sense, you want to have the true instant use cases, Attendant, I think, is a good word. Either someone or something, if you look at Internet of Things, is waiting on that result of the payment, That makes the key, and that is kind of the super track we need, for instant payments. Then you have all the other kind of use cases, and I will zoom into a bit like that. That could, benefit as well from the instant payment, functionality. I think it was mentioned that speed is one of the biggest elements of instant payments, but more important, maybe the 24/7 element, to be able to make a payment anywhere, anytime. And most importantly, for a lot of our corporate clients especially, is the feedback of an instant payment. They know exactly if the beneficiary has received the payment or not, which is different than a classic payments, which you only get to know, a couple of days later when no return is sent. Oh, the beneficiary has received the funds. With instant payments, you get immediate, or a little bit later in the case of a non-time critical, maybe, that the beneficiary has received the funds. I think that that's crucial, one of the elements to make this work. And when you look as well, heading into this perfect storm, today we have 25 seconds to process a payment. That's the current rule. In October, that will move to 10 seconds and only 3 seconds for the beneficiary bank to process a payment. So if you receive those, the expected loads of payments that we see coming already, the volumes are increasing on a daily basis that we see. So if I'm a beneficiary bank, I would love to identify which payments are truly critical, to kind of scale my systems, and to have that lane that always is on for those payments. And when it's really busy, I have the ability to put some payments for a little bit aside. And because today, if you don't do that, the only thing you would do, because that's a scheme rule, you need to reject. So, and it was said many times, what does the customer want? In the end, he wants to make a payment seamlessly as possible. So if you start rejecting, saying you are a little bit too late with your payment, how to explain this to a customer? So I think this is the key driver for this non-time critical scheme.
Indeed. Thank you, Michael. No, we do not want to clog up the real instant payment where someone is waiting. Now, Carl, I'm turning to you for the next question. And first of all, we're very pleased to have the Swedish market participating in TIPS since February last year. And just to talk about TIPS for the Swedish market, TIPS introduces new functionalities, ensures harmonization, and reduces investment potentially in domestic fragmented solutions. Now I'd like to know from you, how valuable is it for a non-Euro market or for a PSP like SEB to have access to TIPS?
Thank you. Well, it's a fairly boring treasury aspect that is the most crucial for us, since TIPS is the accounting is done at the central bank. It takes away all the possible risk concerns and so on, and the finality in the interbank settlement is sort of strictly defined, which allows us to allocate more liquidity, especially in a 24/7 environment, unlike if the settlement occurs on another platform, basically. So this gives us more wiggle room in terms of what products and volumes and values we can process without having to take having any risk concerns on a bank level. So TIPS, we really appreciate that. We run, as you know, the domestic Swedish instant setters on TIPS, not using the the standard product, but that worked flawlessly, and we are very happy with the capacity of the system, that it's with the high capacity, and now introducing more products on the platform gives us more opportunities as well. So yeah, regarding this, the tips platform is very good out of more sort of hygiene things from a treasury point of view.
Thanks a lot, Carl. Very good, thanks. I'm turning now back to Michael. Michael, you had, following your proposal to set up a task force for non-time critical payments and tips, we did so, as you know, and you're part of that. One of your key arguments that you bring forward is that non-time critical payments can help banks from a reputational point of view. And you've spoken a little bit about that already, but we're going to be diving a bit deeper into that. There is, more time to process a higher volume of transaction without potentially facing capacity constraints where you could have rejections for certain types of payments, for example. Now that's really true. And which business cases are you talking about? And how does the Deutsche Bank view the type of business cases that could be applicable to non-time critical payments?
Yeah, so in general, right, so no, let me start. A couple of years back, we already started to offer batches to our customers for instant payments. And this was basically driven of the need for our customers to be able to pay out later the same day than the current cutoff time for the classic flow. So it's not per se that people are unhappy with the current classic processing, because it's very reliable, very certain, but it's just a business need to make those payments later in the day. And using different rails at that moment in time were just too expensive, high value, or even in that sense. So we developed the batch processing for instant payments. And when we started with that, we just went through the batch and sent it out in the infrastructure. And then we saw some issues occurring. Let me call it like that. We saw a lot of timeouts happening. So we had to develop a so-called throttling mechanism to allow for not too much payments to go in at once into the industry. And there are multiple reasons why the industry in certain cases could not cope with the volume here, but it really triggered us to think about, hey, do we need potentially different processing types? And in parallel, of course, Netherlands was looking at the non-time critical scheme as well. So we learned a lot on that, right? How to do that maybe on European level as well. Because in the end, there are clients that do want to use the batch functionality, the unattended way of processing, but do want that on any moment in time, on this non-business day, during evening hours. They just want to make the payments on that moment. Speed is second relevant, right, for that. Of course, they expect the speed, but it's more, right, the fact that they can initiate a payment whenever they want and receive the full back of the processing result within a reasonable amount of time. I think that's the most important use case. And yes, a lot of them, right, could still be facilitated through the classic rails, and the bigger volumes as much as possible. We would like to keep on the classic rails from efficiency, from a cost perspective. But for those use cases, right, I see a big demand for the non-time critical payment flows.
Thanks a lot, Michael, indeed. So it's really depending on the business case where it makes sense and which rail it goes into. Carl, I'm coming back to you and talking about the evaluation of our change requests that we have lined up for tips. And the SEB gave the highest score to the change request introducing non-time critical payments from a business value perspective. What were the key factors that you had behind that scoring? How do you see non-time critical payments benefiting the Nordic market, especially also in Sweden?
Yeah, our score was mainly based actually on the euro area. We have some branches in Finland and Germany, and we also have euro business in the rest of the group. But we have two sides of this. On the remitting side, we see the value in being able to process large volumes of transactions 24/7 on behalf of our customers without getting this reaction, as Michael mentioned, those timeouts and so on, because that creates issues both for us and our clients. And on the subsequently on the beneficiary side, we really like to take this timeout risk out of it, so we can prioritize those really instant payments that needs to settle immediately, and then queue up and delay some of those that just needs to settle soon, rather than reject some random transactions here and there. So that's we see that with the instant payment regulation, and that the risk for rejections gets too high, or otherwise it's a cost thing as well. So we will have to pay up for performance in our systems that we might use a few seconds every year, and that doesn't make any sense. So it's a hard, and we think this is a very good middle ground to put the volumes in. And for the Nordic markets, we are in a transition phase from our current legacy ACH products, so into our new, more modernized SEPA-like file solutions at the different ACHs. So this will probably be in scope maybe in a couple of years here in the Nordic markets, since we need to finish the projects that we have already started. But we see the same use cases also in all of the Nordic currencies as well. And I would like to highlight also that as mentioned earlier, the simplest use case is where say a corporate who makes large volumes of payments in files, if they have a technical issue that they want to send out a lot of crucial payments, but they can only deliver the instructions fairly late in the afternoon for some issue, and we cannot perform them in the normal SEPA files. We want to be able to do those transactions without having a lot of reactions. So that is a very, very, very important use case for this type of product. The most simple one.
Yeah. No, indeed. Yes, true. Thanks, Carl. Martin, we started with you, and now my last question is for you before we take further questions from our audience. So Martin, skeptics of non-time critical payments often cite the introduction of complexity into their systems as a key concern. Now, after 6 years of experience of Rabobank using the non-time critical, how do you evaluate the trade-off between complexity and the benefits of the non-time critical payments?
Yeah, it's a relevant question. I think the benefit side has been discussed quite extensively already. So from the technical perspective, of course, you need to apply some changes in your systems, right? It's payments infrastructure, so you need to be careful about that. So in a general sense, if I remember correctly, there will be a technical briefing right after. But in a general sense, you'd need to consider identifying your non-time criticals versus time criticals. You would need your non-time criticals to ignore the hard timeout, which is kind of the entire idea behind the NCT processing. And thirdly, you would need, like Michael mentioned, the waiting list or the throttling or the queuing mechanism to also hold and release your payments right in time. So on a very short list there, that would be the key characteristics to consider. From a processing perspective, from the user perspective, I think one of the key elements you need to keep in mind would be making sure that the user, specifically when you talk about private individuals, has the message that the payment is received and it's in process. Because if that message is not displayed and this information is not relayed in an effective way to the user might reinitiate the same payment. And that's the exact scenario that we're trying to avoid. So that would be some of the key elements to consider in that regard. This sounds probably like adding complexity to your systems. In a way, it is. But then again, from our experience, the changes were relatively small. We did combine them with the changes we needed to make for the instant payments processing anyway. So institutions that are moving towards instant only now, or not only now with the IPR, might be able to combine those changes as well. We didn't, or at least I couldn't find the exact figures for back in 2019, but one of the involved analysts did estimate that it was less than 10% of the total effort spent back then relating to the non-time critical addition or overlay or whatever you want to call it. So it's probably less. Fabrizio mentioned a slightly smaller number, I guess, or estimate, but it's in a smaller range of implementation complexity. Lastly, I would also say that it's not necessarily implementation complexity related, but you are removing complexity from your entire operations chain, because rejecting payments lead to questions, lead to interactions with your users. And if you remove or limit the rejected payment amount, you are removing complexity from other pieces of your operations chain. And I don't think you should underestimate that part, as rejected payment follow-up is far more costly in relation to any other form of a delayed payment processing, if I could put it that way. So long story short, yes, some complexity, but major benefits, and also a real complexity reducing in your entire payments chain.
Thanks a lot, Martin, for making those very, very relevant points. So no need to be too worried about the implementation complexity. It's minimal, but indeed benefits and reducing complexity on other operational issues. Thank you. So we've reached the end of our questions that we had for you. Now we can have a look. Now we can have a look at the questions that we have received. Now there are a few questions. Perhaps a question about, is the Netherlands implementation in line with the IPR? That was a question put out there. I wonder if anyone would like to take that. Perhaps Martijn or even Michael, that could be something for you.
I'm happy
yes,
to answer, or Martijn, please jump in. Right, the essence of the non-time critical is that in essence it's a credit transfer, not an instant credit transfer, and that's the essence of the procedure. So we try to, let's call it, mimic, right, the advantages and the processing of instant payments, and that's the goal. But in essence, it's a standard credit transfer, right? And that's the essence of a non-time critical payment. So also that means that from the client point of view, as also Martijn said, they initiate a payment or a non-time critical payment. They don't initiate an instant payment per se, right? If that's in your bank, right, you still have the kind of instant payment or indication in your initiation screens that cannot turn into a non-time critical. That needs to follow the full IPR rules. So if you allow customers to initiate, right, a payment or a non-time critical payment, that's when we can follow the non-time critical payment flow. And also meaning that in batches, right, clients need to indicate specific, agreed codes. This is a non-time critical batch file. So that's the answer.
Maybe if I can slightly build on that as well, I think Michael answered the question perfectly already from a more technical perspective. I would also try, or at least like to argue, that this way of implementation does really fit into the general thought behind the IPR. So making sure that instant payments are available to as much users or as many users as we can in a way that's actually meeting their requirements, and not that's in a way it's the IPR technically speaking, or SCT technically speaking. But you could argue that making sure it happens and also having a back alley to make sure it happens very closely to the intended scheme is quite in line of the thought, the general goals of the IPR, I would say.
Yeah, the new normal, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you very much. So NTC makes the SCT faster, as fast as the SCT in most of the cases, 99+%. All right, thank you very much. And perhaps one more question I'll leave open who would want to take it. Does indicate that sanction screening leads to additional 2 to 3% rejection of instant payments due to false positive hits. Does the NTC suffer from the same problem? Any one want to take that question?
I'm happy to answer a bit. No, fully agree. That's one of the frictions, right? Especially for instant payments, the sanction screening and the obligation, especially for cross-border payments, which makes us still quite unique in the world that we have a cross-border instant payment schemes, right, available in Europe. But it comes with the friction of the sanction screening obligation that all banks have, and especially banks, right, that have operations outside Europe, in the US, or what have you. You're bound to do sanction screening. So as much as we try to bring the rejection or the false positive rate down, but here also NTC gives an opportunity that for certain payments, you can make a choice to look at them, right, and to hold them for a review if needed, right. It's not in the spirit, right, but in those cases where you're on the edge, right, on a hook, how to say that, you have the opportunity to do a little bit more investigation on those transactions. And one point to add, maybe, given also that the amount threshold will be lifted. So that's a very, of course, time critical, right? Also, the higher the amount, the more critical the payment is, right? That's a fact as well. So also there, as a bank, you can make a choice on non-time critical. That from an amount perspective, right, you could still treat them a little bit different, almost like a high value payment. So there's a lot of opportunities to leverage, right, the non-time critical in that respect.
Thank you very much, Michael. And at this point, I see that we have run out of time around our fireside. And I'd like to say thank you very much to our panelists, and we've had a fantastic conversation. I hope it was as valuable to everybody as it was for me. Thank you. I'll hand back to you, Eileen.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you to the whole panel. Lots of interesting questions answered, and we also got lots in the chat here, but I think we managed to cover most of them. And some are left for Andrea here at the last presentation of the day, so we're not done yet. So thank you to all of you, and Karen especially for moderating this panel. So again, we're just in case you just joined, this is the place to ask your questions. Scan the QR code, and then we will be moving on to our last technical part of the session today. So I want to bring in our last speaker. Andrea, are you with me? Let's see if we can have our last speaker on. I hope he's still here. There you are, Andrea Di Martini from Banca d'Italia. I'm delighted to have you on board today. So I want to hand over to you for our technical introduction to the non-time critical payment. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you, Eileen, and good morning, everyone, also from my side. And thank you for inviting me to this very interesting focus session. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
We can.
Thank you. So after this very interesting discussion at the business level, I will try now to translate this topic into more functional and technical details with my presentation today, where I'm going to share some insight about the non-time critical functional solution that we as Banca d'Italia, as a service provider of tips, we put in place for answering the request of raising the detailed assessment of the change request tips 41, just to give you some background information that is currently ongoing and under finalization on our side. So before starting, some preliminary remarks relating to the principles we use to approach this investigation. So first of all, the main point is that the non-time critical traffic and service is expected to reuse the same messages that are currently in use, for example, on the SEPA credit transfer instant implementation guidelines. So we had to differentiate the flow at network protocol level, and our proposal was to add a dedicated suffix at the protocol envelope layer in order to make sure we can segregate the real instant traffic with the, let's say, fast non-instant traffic. On top of that, as a market requirement, we have been asked to add also some elements at the level of the payload in order to clearly mark the transaction as a non-time critical. So Based on the explanation, so these two items, on our side, we have to secure, first of all, the current behavior of the TIPS machine. Since TIPS machine is highly oriented and optimized to process instant payment flows, whose life cycle is very short in our internal components. So in a matter of seconds, the payment enters, gets confirmed, is settled, and then is, let's say, moved out of the core function. Now, the paradigm will mix in the same system real instant traffic and fast payment, non-time critical, resulting into the potential distortion of the core functioning, because we are very well equipped to manage the instant traffic, but payments whose life cycle could extend up to 6 hours could become a problem in terms of performance. That's why we try to design some new component, maybe looking at the next slide, to reply and to answer the main requirements that have been listed in the CR41. So just as a recap, the non-time critical traffic is expected to have a life cycle of a few seconds up to 6 hours, meaning that if the beneficiary PSP is in a position to respond immediately, there is no, let's say, stop at the level of the central system. We will set the transaction almost immediately following the instant paradigm. Of course, as I mentioned, we had to take into consideration all the mitigation measures to avoid the impact on the concurrent instant traffic. We have been asked to introduce a new use case. Since we have 6 hours, the customer, the originator PSP, may decide at a certain point in time, if there is no response from the beneficiary PSP, to cancel the pending transaction. And to support all the abnormal scenarios investigation, there will be the possibility to inquire the system to make some investigation about the status of a pending non-time critical, and also for the beneficiary PSP to send an unsolicited status update just to inform the central system that the payment has been received by the beneficiary, but it has not confirmed yet. So it's a kind of intermediate status that could be conveyed back to the originator just to avoid the retransmission of the same transaction. So moving to the next slide, few highlights on the high-level functional design. Because the main innovation that we proposed with the CR41 is a new component that will act at the level of the interface between TIPS and the network service provider layer that will take care of managing the non-time critical transactions in isolation compared to the regular instant traffic. So this component will consume the NTC transactions from the queues of the NSPs. On the other hand, shielding the TIPS core layer, which is the place in TIPS where settlement occurs, in order to avoid the issue I mentioned at the very beginning, that having a long-lasting transaction could impact the performance of the concurrent instant traffic. So there will be an isolation of the non-time critical traffic at the level of this new component that will take care of validating, for example, the correctness of the message from an XML viewpoint. There will be a check on the validity of the corresponding reference data configuration. The layer will also take care of routing the payments from the originator to the beneficiary. And we will see later on also an internal routing function from this new component towards the TIPS core. And the last but not the least, very important, we introduced a concept of waiting list function. And in a nutshell, the waiting list will support the system, since there will be, for non-time critical, no reservation of funds when the transaction is received from the originator. So this will be, let's say, a deviation if you look from the perspective of the standard SEPA credit transfer. When you receive the message, you reserve and secure the funds, you send to the beneficiary, and once the beneficiary sends the confirmation, you settle. The waiting list will fill the gap by providing additional pros and contemporary mitigating the risk of overflowing the core with a number of attempts that will, by definition, take more than 20 seconds. So moving to the next slide, I think entering into the details, here we are talking about the function, the way the new component will work vis-a-vis the tip score. So this is the internal communication that will be used whenever there is a non-time critical message received, will be processed by the component. The message will be forwarded to the beneficiary PSP. And once we get the confirmation from the beneficiary PSP, so we have the green light to settle, this component will submit a request towards the tip score using the standard channel. So in that point of the platform, we will have both the instant and the near instant traffic at the same time in the same loop, but following the same rules. So the payment will be injected, will be processed immediately by the core, and in case there is a rejection due to, for example, lack of liquidity, the payment will be put in the waiting list for further processing after some time. So the waiting list feature is a key way to optimize the lack of reservation of funds. You may wonder why there could be no reservation of funds for the non-time critical, and the answer is, let's say, rather technical, but I will try to explain. Unfortunately, the reservation of funds is a feature that is offered at the level of the core in the regular flow. So whenever you do all the processing, all the validation, you submit the payment at the core level, and then you reserve the funds. We couldn't do the same for non-time critical for the reason I mentioned before, because following the same rule and keeping the reservation of funds at the level of the tip score will have the side effect of maintaining the transaction potentially in the core for more than 20 seconds, up to 6 hours. And that was exactly what we wanted to avoid. The waiting list feature I mentioned will fill the gap because we'll try to orchestrate the settlement attempts without the involvement of the originator and beneficiary PSP any longer. So they did their job submitting the transaction and confirming the non-time critical. Any settlement reattempt will be managed internally by the system within the 6-hour time frame. And also we introduce a concept of a smart reattempt. In the extreme scenario in which on the debiting side, there is no sufficient balance to cover the non-time critical transaction. So in order to manage this, the idea was to rely on internal notifications from our liquidity management component. So whenever some fresh liquidity is either received from the RTGS system or is credited due to other transactions on the same account, the waiting list will activate a settlement reattempt just for that payment insisting on that account, because we know that fresh liquidity has arrived, so we have a higher likelihood of settling with the next settlement attempt. I think we can move to the next slide just to provide some visual representation on the architecture. So We have a network layer that will take care of segregating the flows by using a different suffix at the network protocol layer. You may be familiar with .EPC suffix, which is currently used for marking regular SEPA credit transfer instant payment. We will add a similar suffix just for NTC, so that when the payment lands on the system, we will know simply by looking at the network envelope what is the right component that should cope with it and what is the schema validation that we should apply. I think we have some additional slide on the workflow. Yes, just to explain with a visual representation what I mentioned, what I anticipated before. So we have a non-time critical payment originated by a PSP that will reach the TIPS NTC component. This will activate a number of validations, and as a successful result of these validations, the payment will be forwarded back to the network protocol layer, aiming to reach the beneficiary PSP of the non-time critical. So with step 4, the beneficiary PSP will be informed about the transaction, and they may decide to respond immediately via message number 5, confirming the willingness to settle the non-time critical. If this is the case, the payment will be immediately transferred, I think, with the next slide, so after step 5, with step 6, by the TIPS non-time critical component towards the TIPS core. This will be very fast, so we will move the funds on the 2 accounts, we will confirm back the successful settlement, and then we will inform the 2 stakeholders that payment has been settled. So this is the way we shielded the resources of the core, because the settlement at step 6, 7, and 8 will take no more than a normal SEPA credit transfer instant. And in case we have a rejection at step 8, because there is an internal failure due to a lack of liquidity, the TIPS waiting list will simply attempt again to send the message number 6 after some time on, or when there is enough liquidity on the debited account. Moving to the next slide, I think this is just a recap of the non-time critical use cases that will be managed directly by the component. So I mentioned the cancellation, so the possibility for an originator to cancel a transaction that is still within the 6 hours and it is still pending. We have inquiry mechanism. The retry of settlement attempt now should be discussed with sufficient details. But in the end, the waiting list will take care of the whole payment life cycle and also the timeout management. Because in the end, after 6 hours, if there is no confirmation from the beneficiary PSP, we are still forced to close the transaction from a central system viewpoint. And last but not the least, this component will also take care of sending back both to the originator and beneficiary PSPs the confirmation messages, so the PAX2 for the non-time critical transaction. Maybe one additional point that is not mentioned in this list of use cases, but it might be relevant for those of you who are not familiar with the requirements of the TIPS 41. There was a specific request to set up some reference data flag in our common component to basically opt in or opt out the feature from a business viewpoint. So from a beneficiary viewpoint, you may decide to flag non-time critical acceptance in the reference data, and this information will be published into the TIPS directory that we deliver on a daily basis to all the subscribers. So with this flag, basically, if you set to false, what the system does is simply preventing any forwarding of the non-time critical to those PSPs who opted out the service. So immediately from the central viewpoint. So you will not even receive the non-time critical message from the central system. As a conclusion, in the next slide, just some key point for discussion. Basically, our main objective was not to create a segregation of liquidity on the TIPS accounts or the TIPS ancillary system technical account when introducing this new service. So the same pool of liquidity with the same accounts and the same static data configuration will be fully reusable for both regular instant and non-time critical instant, non-time critical payment. Using the architecture I described, we mitigate any risk of creating issue on the current TIPS architecture, and we kept the traffic segregated. So technically, the different SLA can be guaranteed in parallel. Also, from a liquidity management viewpoint, you may wonder that non-time critical could lead, in theory, to long-lasting reservation of funds, or maybe peaks of reserve liquidity due to a bulk that is attempting to debit the same account in TIPS. So all these points will be addressed seamlessly due to the introduction of the waiting list and the absence of any reservation of funds. So still we can keep the workflow lean, but we avoid that we block liquidity for a very long time, up to 6 hours on some accounts. Last point is just a remark that is overcoming one of the limitation that we identified during our preliminary assessment for the same CR. At that time, we didn't provide such an efficient solution. So using the same TIP score, we were forced to have a limitation in the concurrent number of pending non-time critical payments that we finally were able to remove completely. So at the moment, there is no limitation. There will be some throttling mechanism implemented both at the NSP side, but also at the level of the NTC in order to make sure that we are not receiving a high number of transactions per second at the same time that could prevent the normal behavior of the system. I think I reached the end of my presentation, so maybe I can give the floor back to Aline and open for any questions.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Lovely. Thanks so much. That was a lot of content. I think everybody skipped lunch and had espressos because it went absolutely mad in the chat. But we are going through the questions here, and I think we've answered most of them, guys. Everybody listen up here. So we have answered most of the questions that you are shooting at us. So this is the good news. And the even better news is that we will publish everything on our web pages. So you can rewatch this as many times as you like and go through the slides and also watch again the panel, because the panel also answered a lot of your questions in here. Maybe, Andrea, I just want to have one quick question for you, because it seems like there's someone asking here quickly. Will NTCs still receive confirmation of credit to the payee? I assume the answer is yes, but can you maybe highlight me on that?
Yeah, if here we are talking about confirmation to the payee, meaning in the sense of distant payment regulation, indeed the beneficiary PSP will be in a position to confirm to the central system when they credited the funds to the ultimate beneficiary. There is no, let's say, requirement or constraint from a flow viewpoint. We are mimicking with the current solution of the non-time critical, the former flow of the SEPA credit transfer instant, in which, in theory, the beneficiary PSP can decide whether waiting the confirmation from the central system before crediting the ultimate beneficiary, but also the other way around. So they can simply confirm immediately and then confirm back to tips and wait for the successful settlement. So
super. Thank you, Andrea. Thanks so much for joining us today. There was a lot of good content here for everybody to digest. We are running out of time. I just want everyone to just give us your feedback here. So you see on the screen, scan the QR code and give us the feedback of the session. There was a lot of content in today's session as always. So, you know, it is really a time to buckle up when we start these and stay with us. But give us your feedback because we do these sessions for you. So it's really important that we know what you liked and what you would like to hear about in the future. So do that for us. And then I want to bring back Dimitri here and let him close up the session for today. Dimitri, over to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Eileen. Well, this focus session is slowly but surely coming to an end. Again, our purpose today was to share with you some details on our implementation of non-time critical payments in TIPS. As usual, I'm taking notes during the session, and I would like to share with you some of my takeaways today. So we started with Fabrizio, and then Fabrizio explained to us that the NTC is actually not a novelty. It's already implemented successfully in various places in the world. And one of the prominent cases being the Netherlands, for instance, with we heard that there is a special code to differentiate from regular instant payments. Useful clarification from him was also that we want to increase the speed for some relevant use cases, but of course, not at the cost or without impacting the pace of settlement of instant payment. And of course, Fabrizio covered several use cases covering both the bulk and the non-bulk payments. For the bulk, it's salaries, pensions, for instance. Thank you, Fabrizio. That was very, very useful. Then we moved to a very interesting panel. We heard first from Martijn the benefits that NTCs bring in the Netherlands, and that is to recall flexibility, so no need to reinitiate the payment compared to a channel where it would be fully instant. And there is a very high percentage of NTCs being processed at the same pace as an instant payment. Martijn did not give the figures, but out of my head, I kind of recall that the NTCs are my figure was 98%, above 98% processed like instant payments, which is a tremendous improvement. Michael mentioned the value of using for 24/7 rates for that. Also the value for the businesses of receiving the confirmation from the beneficiary bank very quickly. Michael also highlighted the challenges sometimes for bulk payments, and from that perspective, the time matters, so the speed of payment matters, but the ability to plan and the certainty is also very important. And that combination of elements, so time, but also certainty, makes the demand for NTC quite important. Then we had Carl, and Carl confirmed the value of leveraging on the instant payment rails. Interestingly, we heard from him as well that trying to process everything as instant payment could lead to contention from the sizing perspective, meaning that the days that you would have really high peaks, or the moments, actually not the days, the moments that you would have really high peaks would result in a sizing of the platform that would not be cost effective. And from that perspective, this gives a room for NTCs to deliver value. Finally, we heard from Martijn about the changes. I think that was really an important element, because that's something we hear sometimes, that it would require changes to the back end of the banks. We heard that those changes are indeed necessary, but that they're limited, and that they quickly outweigh. They are quickly outweighed by the benefits of NTCs. And we heard as well that NTCs also reduce, in a way, complexity in the payment chain. So again, a big thank for the moderation, Karen, but also for the outstanding contribution from the panelists. Thank you again. Last but not least, we had a great, introduction from Andrea to the technicality of NTCs in tips. We heard about the suffix at the level of the message envelopes, and also the changes or the elements in the payload to differentiate between NTCs and standard instant payments. So Andrea explained how the requirement to support NTCs without affecting the IP channel translate into design principles, and concretely it means that there will be a new NTC component in tips to segregate from the IP flows. This component will be connected from directly to the core modules to orchestrate the settlement. We heard about, I like a lot the term, the notion of waiting list as a mean to optimize liquidity, and also the smart reattempt, Andrea, that's really a good term. So the fact that the reattempts would be done when we noticed that liquidity was received from the debtor account. So that's very interesting. Andrea, very clear your explanation, and thank you for that. And maybe to conclude, we had today quite a good attendance, and we managed, I hope, to answer most of the questions that were raised in the chat. We are, of course, happy to see that there is a continued interest in these focus sessions. And again, a big thank to all speakers today. Once more, also a big thank for the backstage team for the outstanding organization. And I hope that you found this session insightful. And of course, we are happy to welcome you in other focus sessions that we will plan in the near future. Now it's time for me. Ellen, you said we are a bit late. I think we are just 1 or 2 minutes late, but it's time for me to wish you a good lunch and a good afternoon. So Ellen, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. So it's super pleasant to have you on board. So thanks for joining us today. Exactly, we're just 2 minutes over, so we did good at the end catching up. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Please just do give us the feedback, scan the QR code. It's like a 30-second yes/no kind of a questionnaire. It will really not take any of your time. You can do it on the way to the canteen while you enjoy lunch. So it's really useful for us. We try to take your questions on board. Also, you often give us input about what you want to learn about in future sessions. So, fill it in. Let us know what you want more deep insights on, and we will try to set up those sessions in the future. So thanks for today from my side as well. Thanks again to all the speakers and to all you that participated in today's event. Thank you and goodbye.